A rent notice arrives on a Tuesday. It is polite. It is also final. No explanation, no apology. 12% more for the same two-bedroom. The tenant does the human thing. She blames the owner. She pictures a man in a polo shirt punching numbers into a spreadsheet because he got greedy. She is looking at the wrong door. The owner may sign the lease. The owner may cash the check. The number on the page often does not begin in that office. It is assembled in Richardson, Texas, inside a company most renters have never heard of, then pushed back out to buildings in Atlanta, Denver, Nashville, Seattle, and dozens of other cities that do not share a landlord, a skyline, or a city council. The company is RealPage. The product is YieldStar, later wrapped into a larger revenue management suite. Every day, competing property managers feed it facts the public cannot see. Which units sat empty overnight, which leases expire next month, what a neighbor down the corridor actually paid, not what the listing claimed. The software does not ask them to become friends. It asks them to become inputs. Then it speaks. A recommended rent, a recommended concession, a recommended patience with vacancy. The on-site agent who used to haggle in the model unit now stares at a screen that already knows what the building across the arterial is doing, because that building is on the same platform. This is the contradiction hiding in plain rent. Housing still looks local. The price is increasingly not. A tenant bargains with a person. That person is bargaining with an algorithm trained on rivals. If enough rivals accept the same advice, the market stops behaving like a market of independent guesses. RealPage will say the software only advises. That sentence matters. Advice is not a gun. Landlords can ignore it. Many do not. The platform was built to make ignoring it feel like leaving money on the table. So the question is not whether a computer can multiply occupancy by asking rent. The question is what happens when competitors stop guessing in private and start answering the same machine. For decades, apartment rent was a local craft. A leasing agent walked a floor plan. She checked classified ads, then Craigslist, then a binder of comps. She knew which unit faced the dumpster. She knew which tenant would leave if the number jumped $50. She had a manager who wanted occupancy high enough to sleep at night. The building across the street was an enemy and a mystery. You could see the banner. You could not see the ledger. That world trained the public. Rent went up because the neighborhood got hotter, because taxes rose, because the owner was cruel or lucky. The story stayed personal. The apartment industry did not stay personal. In 1998, Steve Wynn launched RealPage as software for the people who actually run buildings. Applications, accounting, maintenance tickets, the dull spine of multifamily work. Pension funds and private equity were learning to love apartments. Portfolios hate improvisation. Airlines had already turned improvisation into a sin. An empty seat at takeoff is worthless. An empty apartment on the first of the month dies the same quiet death. In the 1980s, American Airlines and the Sabre system made a science of that fear and named it yield management. Raise fares when the cabin will fill. Defend the fare when a discount would teach everyone to wait. Hotels copied it. Rental cars copied it. Then the model reached the doors people sleep behind. Jeffrey Roper, who had worked in airline revenue management, helped carry that gospel into housing. Stop letting a young agent in the model unit give away the farm because she likes the couple with the dog. Feed occupancy, expirations, and lease terms into a pricing engine. Maximize revenue per unit, not the warm feeling of a full parking lot. YieldStar became RealPage's vessel for that engine. In 2017, the company bought lease rent options, known as LRO, from the Rainmaker Group, folding a major rival tool into the same vendor. The industry's pricing brain was concentrating, even as the buildings still wore different logos. By the late 2010s, a renter could live in a Greystar or Mid-America community and never meet a person with authority to cut a deal on the spot. Authority had moved upstairs, then into software. Then the 2020s arrived as a stress test.
In 2020, the pandemic emptied some downtown towers and froze some evictions. In 2021 and 2022, asking rents in Sunbelt and mountain cities lurched at speeds that felt like a different country. Phoenix, Austin, Tampa, Boise. National rent indexes logged double-digit climbs in a single year. Households blamed greed. Economists pointed at migration, years of underbuilding, and cheap money. Those forces were real. What most people missed was the plumbing. A growing share of large, professionally managed buildings no longer priced as lonely competitors. They subscribed to the same revenue management vendors. They uploaded numbers that never appeared on Zillow. They received daily suggested rents. The street still showed competing flags. The calculator behind the flags was becoming shared infrastructure. On October 15, 2022, ProPublica published the investigation that dragged that infrastructure into daylight. Internal materials, former employees, property managers who described taking the software's number while units sat dark. The reporting did not invent the surge.
It asked a ruder question. If rivals share the sensitive facts that used to live inside each office, is the surge still just weather? The old binder of comps was public-ish. Listings are advertisements. Advertisements flex. Actual signed rents, actual occupancy, actual days on market, those are a building's family secrets. Yield management only becomes a system when those secrets stop being secrets among competitors. By then, the vendor itself had changed species. In 2021, the private equity firm Thoma Bravo took RealPage private in a deal valued at about $10.2 billion. Software that sits on the cash register of American housing commands a premium. That premium had a reason. Americans still narrate rent as a duel between a household and a landlord. The industry spent 20 years turning rent into a network problem. The network arrived as a subscription. Once information moved through a hub, each client could be taught what the others were doing without anyone dialing a competitor. The market still had many names. It had fewer independent guesses.
Follow the people who needed the machine. Start with the revenue manager on the 12th floor of a regional operator. Her bonus is not a full building. Her bonus is revenue per available unit. A vacant apartment that holds a high asking rent can look on her dashboard healthier than a full building that blinked and offered a month free. She does not hate tenants. She reports to an asset manager who reports to a fund that bought the property on a pro forma that assumed rents would keep climbing. Now the leasing agent in the clubhouse. She meets the nurse who cries at the renewal. She used to have a drawer of tricks, a waived fee, a free parking spot, a $100 haircut if the person signed today. Those tricks made her feel like a professional. They also made her, in the eyes of corporate, a leak. RealPage sold itself as the plug for that leak. According to ProPublica's 2022 reporting, the company marketed the promise of outperforming the market on the order of 2 to 5% by replacing improvisation with discipline. 2 to 5% does not sound like a revolution. On a building with millions of dollars of annual rent, it is a career. Jeffrey Roper's obsession was not theatrical villainy. It was the airline lesson. Human beings discount too soon. They panic when they see empty doors. They identify with the person standing at the desk. Software does not identify. Software keeps the nerve. RealPage's incentive was simpler still. Become the operating system. Once applications, payments, screening, and pricing live in one vendor, switching costs turn into cement. A private equity owner, after 2021, wants net retention and a product that landlords are afraid to peel off. The large operators had their own psychology. In a world of publicly listed apartment REITs and institutional joint ventures, no vice president wants to explain why their community leased cheaper than the submarket. If everyone is looking at similar recommendations, nobody is the fool who charged too little. Parallel behavior can feel like safety, even before anyone calls it coordination. There is a quieter character, the override. Every time a site manager rejects the suggested rent, she creates a record. Former users described, in interviews with journalists, a culture in which overrides had to be justified, in which going off script felt like insubordination. RealPage staff, the reporting said, trained clients to trust the model and to stop treating every prospect as a snowflake. And the tenant? The tenant is not in the Slack channel. The tenant walks in with a paycheck that did not rise 2 to 5%. The tenant still believes negotiation is a normal part of American housing, because it used to be. That belief is the last unpriced asset in the building. The software's job, as users described it, was to retire that belief. None of these people had to sign a treaty in a hotel ballroom. Motives stacked. The fund wanted the pro forma. The vendor wanted the subscription. The remote manager wanted a spine. The local agent wanted to keep her job. The algorithm wanted, if a machine can want, the number that did not flinch. That stack is how a Texas product enters a kitchen, not as a coup, as a series of reasonable careers.
The machine's day begins before the leasing office unlocks. Overnight, property management systems ship a payload to RealPage. Which apartments are occupied, which are dark, what each signed lease actually pays, when those leases end, what concessions were granted, how long a floor plan has sat. This is not the brochure. This is the book. In the morning, a revenue manager opens a dashboard. For each floor plan, a suggested price. Sometimes a suggested concession of 0, sometimes a suggestion to wait. The software has compared this building not only to its own history, but to a set of comparables. Those comparables, investigators later argued, frequently included properties run by competing firms that were also clients. The rival's occupancy, the rival's real rents, the rival's weakness. In the old craft, you inferred those things from a banner and a lie. Here, they arrived as data. Accept. That one click is the operational heart. Accept, and the listing sites update. The renewal letters generate. The agent at the desk inherits a number she did not choose. Override, and you owe an explanation to a chain of command that bought the software so you would stop explaining.
Department of Justice lawyers would later allege that RealPage did not treat acceptance as a polite option. The company, the complaint said, trained clients to follow, monitored who drifted, and designed the product to maximize adoption of the recommendation. Property managers told journalists that the model often wanted them to push rents even as occupancy slipped. Leaving a unit empty for an extra month could be the right answer if cutting the price would train the whole community to expect mercy. Mercy is a leak. Training materials and user accounts described a second commandment: do not negotiate. The prospect in the model unit is not a unique story. The prospect is a data point. If you cut a special deal, you contaminate the price for everyone else, including the competitors, who will see the result flow back into the hub. The old American habit of asking what the desk can do if you sign today meets a system that scores that question as failure. Watch how supply moves under that logic. Economics 101 says a vacant unit should chase a tenant with a lower price. A coordinated yield system can invert the reflex. Hold the unit. Protect the comp set.
Let the vacancy sit like a warning to other managers not to break first. In a tight city, that pause is invisible. In a softening city, it can look like cruelty. Dark windows over a parking lot, and still the asking rent ticks up. Private lawsuits began to pile up after the ProPublica investigation. Tenants in multiple states accused large landlords and RealPage of a modern cartel, not a smoke-filled room, a shared brain. Attorneys general in places including the District of Columbia and Arizona opened their own fronts. The companies denied collusion. They said the software uses data to price more efficiently in a chaotic market, that clients remain free to ignore it, that aggregation is not a handshake. On August 23, 2024, the United States Department of Justice files a civil antitrust lawsuit against RealPage. The complaint's theory is blunt. By pooling non-public, competitively sensitive leasing data from rival property managers, and by turning that pool into daily pricing recommendations, the company allegedly ran an algorithmic scheme that harmed millions of American renters. The government names the harm in housing, not in abstract code: shelter. The factual nucleus is this. YieldStar and its sister tools sat on a vast spread of professionally managed apartments. The Justice Department and subsequent reporting described a reach of up to 20 million rental units. That figure is a ceiling, not a census of every lock. It is still large enough to make a kitchen table price feel national. Hear the truth qualifier, because the law will live or die on it. The software mathematically advises. It does not, by itself, legally force a landlord to raise a rent. No automatic debit from a tenant's account is triggered by a server in Texas.
A human still has to accept. A human still prints the notice. RealPage's defense writes itself from that gap. Advice is speech, and pricing software is as American as a hotel rack rate. The government's reply lives in the gap too. If you build a hub that sees rival books, if you press users to comply, if you scold negotiation, if you reward the holding of vacancies, you may have built an agreement that never needed a meeting. Sherman Act cases have always hunted for a conspiracy. The 2024 complaint asks a 21st century question. Can the conspiracy be a product? Landlords are not spectators.
Some of the largest operators would be pulled into parallel suits, then into expanded federal theories that clients were participants. Their incentive was the next quarter's effective rent. If the algorithm said hold, and holding worked because neighbors held too, the duty to investors began to rhyme with the duty not to compete too hard. Consequences arrive without waiting for a verdict. A teacher in a Sunbelt complex watches the renewal and starts driving 40 minutes farther out. A building posts record asking rents with a row of empty windows. The word market still gets used at city council microphones, as if the market were a weather system. The docket says the weather had a vendor. RealPage disputes the morality play. Efficient pricing, the company argues, can raise some rents and lower others. That distinction is real in theory. In the years of the surge, many tenants experienced only one direction. Intention and outcome refuse to sit in the same chair. The climax is not an explosion. It is a filing. The government says the most familiar monthly bill in American life was, in part, the output of a shared algorithm fed by rivals. Courts are slow. Software is fast.
Even if a judge someday draws a bright line between advice and agreement, the line has to be policed in the daily accept button that still blinks on thousands of desks. And then the trust problem remains. A renter can change buildings. Changing the calculator is a different move.
A lease is a small constitution. It says who may sleep behind a door and at what price the sleeping is allowed. For a century, Americans treated that document as the product of a place. This street, this owner, this season. The RealPage years revealed a different authorship. Not a single puppet master. A shared arithmetic that competitors could join without standing in the same room. The legal system was built for rooms. It knows the dinner where two men agree to hold prices. It is clumsier with a dashboard that 300 companies open before coffee. Call the dashboard advice, and the First Amendment starts to hum. Call it a meeting, and the Sherman Act wakes up. Between those two names sits most of the modern economy. That is the principle this story earns. In essential markets, the ones you cannot browse away from, the ones that eat a third of a paycheck, independent pricing is not a vibe. Independence does not require ignorance. A landlord may read a public listing. A landlord may walk a competing property. What independence cannot survive is a full view of the rival's private book, plus a daily instruction that treating the tenant as a negotiator is amateur hour. Artificial intelligence makes the old vocabulary sweat. The model is not a person who can be deposed into a clean confession. It is a process that can be tuned to punish softness. The danger is not that computers are evil. The danger is that computers are consistent. Consistency is what cartels always wanted and rarely achieved because people cheat. Software cheats less. Yet the inverse error is also a trap. Blaming the algorithm can launder the landlords. A server did not cash the check. A general partner did. If the recommendation was a suggestion, then following it at scale was a choice, repeated every morning in full knowledge that peers were looking at a cousin of the same number. Accountability that stops at the vendor is a story companies like. Accountability that ignores the vendor is a story landlords like. The record sits in the middle, inconvenient to both. Courts can fine a vendor. They can rewrite a contract. They cannot easily restore the feeling, once broken, that the number on a renewal was born in a conversation. Trust is not an exhibit. It is the reason a tenant plans a year, buys a couch, enrolls a child in a school 2 blocks away. When the price seems authored elsewhere, the couch starts to look foolish. There will be more products like this, in more markets that feel intimate.
surge prices on a ride home from a night shift. Each will arrive with a slide deck about efficiency and a footnote about user discretion. Each will dare regulators to prove a handshake inside a neural net. Imagine a city at dusk, lights coming on floor by floor. From the sidewalk, every window is a separate life. From above, if the asking rents were colored by the software that suggested them, whole corridors might shade the same. The color is the plot. A familiar bill can be governed by a mechanism the payer is not allowed to see, while everyone involved insists they are still competing. The open question is not whether math can set a price. Math always could. The question is whether a democracy that still pretends housing is a local bargain can tolerate a national calculator fed by rivals and still call the result a market.